the last 5 years I've wanted to bring him here because of the way in which he actually composes his references. And one of the big things and problems in painting is kind of like, how do you deal with the photo reference? When do you use a photo reference? The lighting, all of that kind of stuff. So he's going to go through the whole entire process with the students and actually orchestrating, what would you call it, like a composition?
Yeah,
multi-figure composition.
Yeah.
And so with that, he's going to go through the entire editing Photoshop process. Starting tomorrow, he'll do a painting, and then Thursday continue with the actual painting. So you'll see the entire thing. Thursday night is the opening and the lecture, and you've got to see these paintings because they're amazing, and there's been a bit of stir, you know, because of the power, you know, when you walk into the lighting, everything is gorgeous. So, all right, further ado.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks.
So I think what I'll do, I'll just try to give you like a little background in terms of my training and how that sort of changed in the age of computers and stuff like that. And then I'll go through the process that I often use in constructing paintings. Sometimes it's different, but if I'm going to do like a multi-figure piece, something like this, this is a pretty big painting, it's about 10 feet. And this is in the museum show, so if you want to see that in person, you can check it out. These take a lot of planning, they take a lot of orchestration, and I always wanted to do multi-figure compositions, and I went to a bunch of different schools, but they never really taught me how to do that. They taught me how to paint form and objects, so I just started trying to do it on my own, and as I continued to do it, the method of doing it changed a bit. I was trained, you know, you sort of paint what's in front of you if you're trying to learn from nature. That's definitely my background, and that's still at the heart of what I do, like trying to understand form, but in terms of storytelling and picture making, when it gets really complex, there are a lot of different tools. Photoshop is a pretty amazing tool, and I use that a lot. Photography, I started out in photography before I became a painter. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. But drawing was the main thing for me when I first got into art, so everything was through the sketchbook. And then I got into painting, and I started doing more of that. I have a few, this is my sketchbook, and there's like a whole range of different types of things that I do. I'm experimenting a lot with different media. So this is like the same with face and graphite and ink pen, brush pen. I still use the sketchbook a lot, but I really learned through drawing more than anything else. I probably do more painting than I do drawing now. These are studies from life in Italy. I spent a lot of time in Italy looking at paintings, old masters, sculpture. A lot of these portraits are students in my class I have drawings of. These are like street scenes in Rome. The projector there. Other drawings, like you're seeing over here, these are more like idea drawings. They're just like little sketches, little thumbnails, which are really good that way to sort of create these things. With the more elaborate ones, there's a painting in the show at MoCA, and this is a Photoshop composite. And when I'm working on these, it's almost like a little stage. And Renaissance and more Baroque, someone like Poussin, he would sculpt figures, and he would create a little box, and then he would light it, and he'd move the figures around, creating this little stage. In Photoshop now, that's pretty much what I'm using it for. And so I can draw things, I can use photos that I've taken and appropriated images. So in this one you can sort of see these are Fred Astaire figures. This is a piece of taxidermy that my father owned that I now own. This was a student that I had pose. This was like a boat that I found. This was a cabbage that I picked up at the farmer's market. This was a birch tree that was falling in the neighborhood. This was from a mineral book. So I was just gathering all these sources to try to create this picture. and I wasn't sure what was going to be in it. So I was just gathering information, gathering resources, researching, and trying to figure out what I wanted. In the process of painting, it can go back and forth between Photoshop and the painting process. Sometimes as I have my images before, sometimes as I'm working it out, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm experimenting on the canvas. Like some of the blue colors, that was something that was on the canvas, and then I later added it to Photoshop. So there's this sort of going back and forth between them. The other thing is, like, I'm not sure what I'm going to put in there. So you see this mockingbird, and I have it flipped. Maybe I want it going this way, maybe I want it going that way. Any of these pieces I can move and I can rearrange. I can just sort of move, I can play around with the scale of them. Photoshop, you know, if I want this bird to be really big, I can go like that, I can rotate it. In the past, you know, these would all be drawings, and then they would scale them up. And that's how I was trained, and that's what I would do. You do a small drawing, you scale it up, just sort of draw it out. But Photoshop, it has certain abilities, particularly like collage-based stuff. It's super helpful. So something like this, or something like this image, this was maybe 4 photo shoots with a group of different people. Shots around the neighborhood, like where I go hiking. I think this was the Colorado River. This is like a famous mountain. I don't know what the mountain is. As I was constructing, I was just getting props and then trying to create lighting situations. And then I'd have all these pieces, and I'd be constructing this picture.
And so the piece that on the poster is 8 feet.
10 feet
10
by
feet
6
by 6 feet. So very big. Very heavy.
Yeah, and
that's in the show.
so you start learning tools. The same thing with photography. I started out as a photographer, and then I left that, and I was just drawing and painting, and then you start incorporating the things that you remember. So I'm going to talk a little bit about photography and the strobes and what you can do with it. Again, it has gels on it all the time, and they use them in film. So it's just like a little thin piece of plastic, and you can experiment with them. I usually sort of set forward so there's a plane that doesn't get hit by the light, and then the planes on the other sides are getting hit by the lights. I like to alter the colors too. Sometimes I'll do like a warm, cool thing. Sometimes I'll just like play around with dramatic colors just to see what I can get. It helps me understand the form when you're seeing like different planes hit by one color, an absence of color, and then another color over here. It really helps the flesh the figure out. You can get really creative with these things. You can play around. You can put them on the ground. You can hold them up, and you can like get like a little top plane or a rim lighting and stuff like that. Again, like if you look at film a lot, they're doing stuff like this all the time, and theater. So this is sort of like a low budget way to play with it. You know, flashes, if you get them used, you can get them sometimes for $25, $50. And I did that a lot. And these remotes are pretty inexpensive now too, you know, like $60 maybe. And the way that they work, the camera has a transmitter on it. Let's see if I can get this thing going. Right here. It sends out a signal, and there's a receiver on these ends, and they have different channels you can put them on. These flashes, I do everything in manual mode, and I can, the third one is there just to mess around. And when you experiment a lot, so you see that it's sort of popping. And if you can look, zoom in a little bit. You can sort of see like different planes of light, like you can see the you have to adjust a little bit. Like you can have a strong light on one side, you can have a softer light. Everything is, if you move the flash further away, that changes the degree of the light. All right. So maybe just 2 people. So whoever's willing. You guys ready? All right. So you can hold it. You ready? I need one person. Grab this. So what I'd like you to do, and I'll give you an example. So give me one of those. All right, so maybe someone's over here, and I want you to sort of take the drapery, and I'll count to 3, and I want you to sort of jump over this thing. Yeah, and you can be going this way. So yeah, I'll be there, and then when I say 1, 2, 3, basically you're just going to be like jumping like that, and you're going to try to pull it up in the air. Don't be afraid to like really jump. Take it off.
Take off the tie. I'll take the jacket.
Nope. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that was excellent. So let's go back and see if we can get the lights going. 1, 2, 3.
Now hold it up and grab like right here.
2, 3.
Go.
Yeah, pretty good. So just to give you a sense what that's looking like.
Oh God!
Yeah.
Way more
It's like stopping
exciting.
the actual job.
Way more exciting.
Let's try, have you both stand here, one here, one there, and have this, and try to pull it up, like that, like you're spreading a sheet. One, two, three. Try about start the back wall here. Have it behind you, and then on 3 you're going to take a step and pull it. Nothing to relax. Ready? 1, 2, 3. That's nice. Try again. One, 2, 3. Nice. Let's try. Anyone else willing to?
Jenna?
And let's get
Kenny.
like 4 or 5 people. Come over here. Yeah. That little purple gel. All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. That's pretty good. All right. So the active stuff is working well. Maybe you can try to set something up. And be careful on this. I wouldn't get too high, but if we can get like a few people, maybe like someone's here. Someone's here, someone else is like next. So let's like stack a bunch of people right here. And then, yeah, other people can be on this side, sort of holding it this way, you're sort of leaning. Maybe someone's sort of, maybe go up a step more. So you're sort of
Sitting on here.
sure. Yeah. Or just up there is good. That's good. Yeah, I would sort of wrap them around some of you. Like that yellow is going to be really beautiful.
No. This is going to be that one. And then number 10 is going to be that one.
So one of the things that you want to think about in lighting is like you want to look at where the model is and you want to look at where the flash is. You want to look at the way that it's angling. If you're trying to look at the planes and you're trying to hit some of those planes with the flash. So sometimes you got to angle them up, you know. Sometimes you want them lower instead of going
Really
really
looking very profile.
yeah. Get around each other a little bit more. Maybe huddle in, like someone's telling a secret. Let's try again. Yeah, I have different color gels on there. So, you know, there's like a blue light, a red light, and a magenta light. Wow, look at that. To the running ones. Wow, that's crazy. What's going on there? So you can see like the, when it's less still, sometimes you get much sharper images, and some of these planes are great. And so sometimes if I'm painting, maybe I'll have like a shirt where the lighting is really great, but the lighting on another head is better. So I'll sort of pick and choose the things that I'm interested in. Part of the difficulty is that some of the images, like I might really like the light on one figure, but based on the other figures that I choose, it doesn't fit. So I definitely had some other images that were really good, but it's more about the orchestration of the complete image. So there's like a editing process where I think in the beginning I'm just sort of going through and singling out the ones that I want, putting hearts on them, you know, that sort of a thing. And then thinking about the interactions. I really like this grouping right here, and I have it on a layer and it's sort of linked. So see how those two are linked together? Let's see, get it back in place. So this was singled out from one. I think this was a close-up. This was from a grouping. I really like the cast shadow that was going on here. And then I think with this grouping, I really liked, the effect of the hand here, and then the way that the light was hitting here. These little cast shadows really interest me. But when I'm setting up the drawing, I like to have more structure. I like to have more angles. And it helps me compare. Corners are easier to compare than curves. I try to work towards my curves.
Just long. And it's good for.
I also like to paint from the computer screen because I can sort of zoom into areas. But using a brush like this, again, in the beginning I'm staying back and I have a stiff brush. Once the proportion is close to where it needs to be, then I'll go in and I'll start using this brush. And this is like really good for contour work. And I'm using my fingers more, my wrist. And so I'm using a ball stick to sort of steady it. But I can go over my lines and I can refine, and I can look for, very carefully, I can look for exactly where that light is ending and how those shapes are fitting together. Teaching, I teach, I definitely get money from that, but I sell paintings now, and one of the things, I did a painting last summer, and it was at an art fair in the Hamptons. In the Hamptons, you know, it's pretty, those people are pretty rich, very comfortable, and I didn't make a painting that was gonna sell there. I made a painting that I thought would be interesting for people to see, even in a community like that. And it was probably the most challenging painting I've made. Very dark, and I worked like really hard for 3 weeks to get this, and usually I work way longer. It was like a 6-foot painting, 3 weeks, and it was like the darkest painting I ever made. And the gallery brought it to the art fair, and it sold within the first 30 minutes for like the most money I've sold a painting for at that size. It was, you know, I'd sold one for like 10 grand, and that one sold for 17. And it was like the darkest thing I ever made. And that just told me that I can make the paintings that I want to make, and there's going to be someone out there that will buy it. They won't always buy it. So for me, that was more important than doing something that I know is going to sell.
Yeah. Sort of reminds me of what you're saying of Diego Rivera selling the Rockefellers. You know?
Yeah.
He just
I mean, I do get a thrill, like if I sell something for a good amount of money, and or if I get into a show. There's definitely a thrill that way, but it's never the same as like being in the middle of a work that you care about. That's always bigger than the other things for me. So I think for the students starting out, that when you feel connected to a painting, that is like the golden spot. You know, I don't think it gets better than that. I think it's great to have a career and be able to survive and be very successful, but I don't think the type of satisfaction, the type of happiness is the same. It's much better when you feel connected and you feel like you're doing something that makes you feel alive or makes you feel like you're doing something about being in this existence. That's the most important part to me. And sometimes I don't sell paintings because of that, but sometimes I do. You know? Yeah.
Would you purposely do it again, go dark, like the darker route, in order
Absolutely.
to sell?
Not in order to sell. I think it was cathartic.
For a certain audience?
My paintings are pretty dark. They're not like super happy paintings. Yeah.
Referring to your story, you made a piece specifically, and you realized that was the darkest one you've ever made. So when that moment hit, it was kind of like, oh, okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. It sort of allowed me to continue to explore. I think it was like a cathartic process in the making of it. Like I felt good about that, the fact that it sold to an important collector. Then it told me like people are sort of picking up on the passion of the making of that. So the sincerity of the process. And maybe it was just luck. Maybe it's not all those things, but it definitely gave me a boost to just want to make the paintings that I want to make, and to try to get that stuff out there. I think art to me is a lot about. I'm overwhelmed by life. I'm overwhelmed by the stuff that happens as a human, and so much stuff happens, particularly today because of like the internet and computers and everything else. We have so many things that we're aware of in terms of information, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by that and not feel like you have any sort of voice. Painting for me is like, at the very minimum, is trying to interact with the stuff that's coming your way. You know, I am an impressionable person. But if I do something about it, if I say something about it, or I write something, I feel like I've done my job in terms of at least addressing the things that have affected me. And sometimes in painting, those things, sometimes you're able to say something really well, sometimes you're not. You know, in my career, there's probably like 5 paintings that I'm like, something happened there that was really great. But the other ones I feel good about, like just trying to address it or being involved in that process. But to answer your question, yeah, it definitely opened the door to make me want to do more of that. I think that's always been a part, but that one, because of the circumstances, it was like Hampton Art Fair, and this was a painting that was not made for the Hampton Art Fair, but there was something really exciting about that happening. Yeah.
I think, you know, like I have friends who live off of 2 collectors, 1 collector, sometimes they're so passionate, and everything goes to those people, and you have a whole career off of those people. So the idea of having to sell to a collector all the time is not always.
Yeah, it's more important for me that the work get out there, that like it's communicating to people. Because, I mean, regardless of how much it sells, you could go through that money really fast. But the painting's going to be around. And so I don't mind selling paintings. There are a few that I sell that I would like to look at now and then. but I can't be a good viewer because I need to have my attention on the painting that I'm making at the moment. So if the paintings are out there and people are like looking at them and it's communicating to them, that's really important to me. The money will last for a little while, but it's going to go away. But the painting's going to be there, and so I want to leave behind the stuff that was important to me, and I want it to be out there, and I want people to see it. That's more important. And as long as I can sort of get by and survive, I'm cool with that. And I was cool with that when I was like 19. I thought I was going to be like in a garret the whole time, and eating like rice and potatoes, and I did that for a long time. My life's good now. I mean, I'm not rich or anything like that, but I can paint. I work like 3 days a week, and I'm secure, and I can continue to do this process, and that's really important to me.